That's like the filming.
Yeah.
Well, this is welcome to Talking Business. We've got Matt on today, someone I've known for, how long have we known each other?
5 years. Well, 5 years, yeah.
2012. 2012 you first met.
Mm-hmm.
When we both were running, you're running the same company.
I'm still running the same company. I think I'm the only person still running the same company from that.
And I was running my first company.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just want to start, first of all, like, who are you, Matt? What do you do?
Good question. Who am I? Yeah, so I'm Matt Lanham. I'm the CEO and founder of Gecko, and we help universities recruit more students by giving them the tools they need to modernize the recruitment process. So a lot of them still using paper, all these kind of things. So we modernize all of that. And yeah, I guess my backstory is I've been running my own business for 15 years, which should make me quite old, but I'm 32. Started my first business when I was 17, so I guess in some ways young given 15 years of running businesses. So yeah.
And just quickly, when you say just a bit more detail on like what GeckoLabs does, just so people have got a good understanding of like how it works.
So yeah, I mean for us, I think, well, universities have got archaic processes. They're still using paper to capture student details. So you think about, you go to one of these fairs, you're interested in studying at university, almost the first thing you're going to encounter is someone asking you to write your name and email and all the other details on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, no one has good handwriting anymore, and especially not kids that are going into university. So they end up losing about 30% of all the details they capture just through those kind of processes. Mm-hmm. And so for us, what we do is we replace that with a digital iPad solution, but it has, some of the properties of paper, i.e. it works offline, so you don't need internet access, because that's a big issue if you're using something like paper and you're moving to digital things. Suddenly the internet kind of connectivity can be a challenge. And then we also help them nurture the student through the rest of the process. So we capture 100% of the details. So it means that people are getting responses a lot quicker. We speed it up, we integrate with their other systems so that they can send emails to you and all that kind of stuff. But it happens way quicker than it used to be. It would probably take weeks normally for people to get some reply back from the university, even acknowledging the fact that they'd made an inquiry. Whereas now it can happen, within minutes, really. And then we help them automate the email addresses. We help them with calling the students. So we help them drive those processes. So a lot of it's about marketing and efficiency, ultimately with the end goal that they get more students through the door. And actually, the products themselves, whilst we've kind of really focused in on education, they're actually, you can imagine in any business, if you're capturing information by paper, you want to follow up with your customers more quickly. The process is the same. We're just very focused on that one sector. We've just kind of really focused on the niche rather than trying to go out to all types of businesses with the solution.
And you said you started your first business at 17. Did you go to university?
No.
See, how funny is that you're now working in this world and like back at 17, like what was your thought process there? Was university?
Well, I think it's pretty integral to my story in that I didn't grow up with any money around me. It sounds a bit weird saying that, but we weren't well off or anything like that, so it was always a bit of a challenge. My mum was mostly a single parent through that, and I in high school I actually don't have any GCSEs either, so it's not even like I really did that well in school. In fact, I think I can remember back to, particularly in computing classes, my background is programming and all that kind of stuff now. Well, obviously now I do lots of things. In the computing class, I used to get kicked out because I hated it. I hated computers, hated everything about them. I didn't want to do computing. So you think about where it evolved to actually programming and using them every single day. It's quite different. So yeah, I kind of dropped out of school and ended up moving down to Birmingham for a couple of years, of all places. I went to college in Birmingham, so I did go, but I actually didn't complete the course because I moved back to Scotland again.
And why was that?
Well, it was pretty boring. Actually, it was just kind of some family-related stuff that ended up taking me back to Scotland. But during that time, when I moved to Birmingham from Scotland, I was in between the education systems of Scotland and England, so I couldn't go to school, like high school, and I wasn't quite at the age where I could go to college. So I ended up having about 9 months of not being in any education. So I was living with my dad, and he was into computers, and so I just started fiddling around with him for something to do. Then I bought a second-hand book called Teach Yourself PHP in 24 Hours. One of these Sam's books. If you're a programmer, you'll know what those look like. But so and it was 10 quid second-hand from a computing fair, and learned how to code. And then I started doing other languages. And during college, I helped out a friend's mum set up a recruitment CRM. So at this point, I guess I was 16. I developed a system for I was pretty good in the computing classes by then, because obviously everybody else didn't know what the hell they were doing, and I'd already kind of been learning it in the background.
And you must have had a natural kind of passion for it, or else you wouldn't have bought that
I think
second-hand book.
I was going to say, I think I always, I like making money, I suppose, is the kind of weird background thing. Like, I can remember as a kid, I'd always be like, I don't know, cleaning cars and, mowing lawns or whatever I could do to just make some money. And
From what age was that?
I don't know, I can remember being in like, it must have been like, I don't know, 7 or 8. I would be like, mowing lawns or something just to kind of make some money. Like it feels, it feels a bit surreal thinking about it, but that was the reality. And I had a newspaper around, and even when I was in college, I had a job that I was working in Wix, the DIY store. So I was doing that, plus at college, plus I was then going and working on this system for my friend's mum. So, I was always quite driven, I suppose, money-wise. And
what do you think? You said you haven't come from money.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of money around you. Well, do you think that's what drove you? Did you want money as like a 7-year-old or a 16-year-old? Did you want money to be able to do things or buy things?
Yeah, I think I always said, a cousin of mine, we would always be talking about like the future and what we would do, and we would always kind of, coming up with business ideas. We probably didn't know they were those at the time, but it was probably more harebrained plans than anything business related. But I did have like my gran had a fruit and veg shop, and so I'd been exposed to people who run their own business through my kind of grandparents. And like when I went down to Birmingham to visit them, they all lived in Birmingham. I'd go to like the fruit market in Birmingham at like 4 a.m. in the morning and help them pick out like tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. So and I always enjoyed working in the shop. Like it was kind of a cool thing to do, like when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So I guess like to some degree I'd been a little bit exposed to it, but not in any serious way. But yeah, I had a sort of desire to be successful, and in terms of starting my own business, really the driver was that when I went back to Scotland, I then worked in a call centre, and I guess that's probably where I got some sales training, because I was selling accidental death insurance.
What?
Yeah, and that was £500,000 of accidental death insurance. So if you got run over by a bus, only public transport as well. So like it was a bus, a plane, a train. You got £500,000.
Oh my God!
And I sold a lot of that. I sold a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I was like the top seller. So then I was like, well, I can do more than this, and I've got these programming skills. So I moved up a level to like the operations, and what I was doing was analysing the data and saying that person's taking too much time on their break. We could be getting them to make more phone calls, and then So I was like analysing the data and doing the coding. So I went to them and I was like, I want more money. Pay me enough to do this job, and like I'm analysing all this data. I'm helping you, get these people to do more sales, and they wouldn't give me the money. So I was like, well, I'm going to go start my own business then. It was a bit strange, and I can't actually recall like the true drivers of it, but I couldn't get a job in programming because I had no experience. They wouldn't give me a pay rise, so I wasn't earning as much money as I wanted to, and so the two things kind of ended up combining. And I'd built a website for my friend's mum, a recruitment agency, so I kind of knew how to do that. And in 2003, when I did this, you could get traction by just doing a bit of Google ads. And we're not talking about loads of money, because back in 2003, Google was pretty early, and advertising was still pretty early. So, for a lot of time, that's how I got business, and I started a web design agency, and that's how we got business.
And did you was it a web design agency at first? Did you even know what that was when you're like, how old were you?
I was going to build websites. I think I can remember back selling a full e-commerce shopping system for like 500 quid. It wasn't like I was like, you can't imagine paying that now, but like in 2003, to me, that was a decent amount of money. And it was just a case of trying to do as much as I could. I think weirdly, like over the years, our biggest source of new clients was Yellow Pages. Like you think, like we had an advert. It was the book, not the online, like the big yellow book that came through the door. Like that's where most of the business came from, like through an advert.
And can you remember your first deal? Can you remember the first person that picked up the phone?
The first ones were a bit weird. There was some weird websites that I built. And actually, the first website we built was just a weird business. But what came from that was that the guy started a second business, and I ended up becoming a director of that business. So the weird thing was that throughout the career I've mostly had this kind of web design agency thing running, but then I ended up starting to dabble in other businesses that I could get involved in. But yeah, I think the first one was like some kind of vitamins. I think the first one was like a vitamins shopping website where you buy like vitamins.
And they literally you decided.
It's like find me on Google. No meetings, no on-site meetings, just literally a phone call, an email, and a phone call, and then I think I got them to pay me through PayPal or something.
So you had an ad in the Yellow Pages. You played around with Google Ads back then. And then people just got in touch. You were like sitting in were you in your bedroom?
Just in the bedroom.
Back at home.
Just in the bedroom, living with my mum still at that point.
Made the site, PayPal, 500 quid.
Yeah.
And then what did you do with that 500 quid? Can you remember those first few deals? Did you just live off it and put it back into the business? Or
I think I probably did, yeah. I mean, like, I made a lot of mistakes in that business over time. Not quite in the early days, but I was more interested in reinvesting it to kind of get more people. I think, it was no outside money, so you needed to have that money in the bank to pay the bills. Now, obviously, living with my mum, I wasn't paying no bills, right? So, that wasn't so much of a concern. But eventually, I didn't want to live with my mum, right? So, eventually, you had to step it up, and therefore the money was becoming, you were spending it at that point. But yeah, I think it wasn't a lot of money, and it was so much. It was easier to get the traction because the competition was low in 2003, and people weren't starting businesses at 17. I can remember going to there was a local, kind of business help type organization run by the council or whatever, and I went along, and the guy was like, "I wasn't even going to have this meeting with you, because I just thought you would be like some chavvy 17-year-old who was, taking the mickey kind of thing." So it was. Whereas now, I think 17-year-olds start a business. Like when you're 17, it's like, why haven't you started a business? That's it's fairly common now.
True.
But
and did you feel a lot of your mates either going to college, maybe some university, others going into jobs, and you're at home living with your mum? Did people get that, or did you feel like a bit of a?
It was definitely an outsider type thing, yeah. Because when I was at college, obviously I was doing the normal things of going to clubs and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really anything that I was particularly bothered about anyway. But yeah, I think the friends that particularly from friends at college, I think they kind of had a notion that I would be kind of successful. I wouldn't call myself successful, but I think they had the notion that I'd go on to do kind of good things because I was always kind of, I'd obviously built this system for for one of their mothers and all this kind of stuff. So. But yeah, I think it certainly wasn't. I wasn't at that point when I'd started the business. There was no clubbing, there was no pubs, there was no going out drinking with mates. And it was just because I'd moved between Birmingham and back home in Scotland. So actually, I'd lost touch with a lot of the friends that I had anyway. So it wasn't losing out on anything. But it was certainly, I wasn't the average 17-year-old.
And it sounds like you didn't enjoy that stuff as much as you did the playing around, selling stuff, making stuff. It sounds like you really enjoyed that from a young age.
It was a passion sort of thing, and I think I'm a problem solver type person. So and I was always, it's not quite comparable, but I always was a bugger for taking things apart. So I had one of these battery controlled cars, the ones that you could sit in and drive around. I had one of those, but I was taking the battery out of it and all this kind of stuff to see how it would work. So I was very kind of. I don't think I ever really got anywhere with that stuff, but I was curious enough to take the screws out of stuff and go, how does this actually work? And so I think in some ways that also kind of translates into being able to look at a business and be oh, how does this actually work? And the problem solving aspect of it. When you're building a website for someone, actually they don't really know what they want. and they don't really know what they need, and so you got to guide them and do a lot of problem solving in that.
So it sounds like a bit of an outsider doing things differently to a lot of people your age, especially at 17, like back then. And I don't know, like when did it feel, and it sounds like, you're living at home with your mum, it sounds quite like a good life almost, you've got it good in a way. When did it feel real? When did it feel like, okay, this is real, and either moved out or it felt scary? Can you remember the first point it felt scary?
Well, I think it felt scary all the time, really, actually, because I think I think the fear of failure is always quite strong, because you don't want to come across to anybody like you've failed, right? Because it's just you've started a business and you want other people to be, you want to impress people to some degree. So I think that's always there. It wasn't long before I met my wife now, we've been together for a hell of a long time, and I moved in with her, and then the responsibility of, bringing in real money became much realer, and she certainly supported us both through the kind of, earlier years. But, I always had this sense of responsibility to make enough money to provide for my family kind of thing. And I think to some degree, not that it's good or bad or whatever, but I think that I wanted to give my kids a better life than I had. Not that it was bad, but just
that drove you.
Better version.
Yeah. That drove you.
It's not like I was living on the streets or something. It was people way worse off than I was, but it was just the security. And my mum and dad had split up. All these kind of things played into it. Like, my mum and dad split when I was like 2, so like that played into, I just wanted security around whatever I was going to do for my kids, kind of thing.
Yeah. And do you feel like that
and
was
actually
a big
creating
driver?
a business probably wasn't really that security, but at that point, didn't have that responsibility yet. So it just got more intense probably as as I met my wife.
So and you've always been like almost done things on your own, like created things on your own, built things on your own. Having that kind of support from your wife, but also pressure to kind of support for the family. Was that important back then, to have people around you and family around you to like support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to some degree I'd always kind of done it on my own, and there was a sense of kind of I'm doing this, but I definitely wouldn't have been able to get very far without like my wife being able to kind of, she was working and I was obviously trying to do this thing, and it wasn't making tons of money in the early days, so without that I wouldn't have got very far, or I'd still be living with my mum, right? So I think you need to feel that, in my opinion, you need to feel some pressure in order to perform, and I think it's certainly something that people that start businesses can fall into the trap of taking money from outside and not understanding the kind of desire, the need to produce revenue, like, because it's it's one of those things that gets talked about a lot. But I think that gave me a sense of you have to go and do sales, because that's the only option. Like, you're not going to take anybody else's money. No one's loaning you any money, so you either sell or you don't pay the bills, kind of thing. Like, that was that was it.
And that was scary. That sounds scary.
I think you naturally just kind of step up towards it. It wasn't easy for sure, but you start charging more money, because that's going to make a difference, and then you start maybe advertising more, because that's going to make a difference. You go do more networking. You start thinking about the local area rather than Google Ads, because a lot of these clients were down all over the world, well, all over the UK at least. So you start localizing it a bit, and then you get a bit of reputation, and then you're obviously kind of snowballing off of that a little bit. Yellow Page,
And your team must have grown. You must have hired.
Well, we didn't. I think that really? Business, like the maximum it got to was 2 people, me and a designer.
Wow.
Because it wasn't really a scalable business, and the web design industry was kind of actually probably tailing off to some degree. I was doing the web design business, and then in 2005. I got involved in this overseas property website, the guy that had a second business. I was kind of inputting into that, and he needed more technical input into it. So, I was like, okay, well, I'll be a director of that as well then, and at one point, I think I had 4 or 5 different businesses on the go doing different things. None of them, I guess, the not so positive side of, doing this for 15 years is, I don't have any money. Like, it's not like I've had some massive exit or something, because I haven't. So it's not, in some ways it's not the success story, and I have high expectations of my own success story, right? It's not the success story that I believe in at all. I'm sure I'm going to get there, but at this stage, it's not like I'm sitting on a pile of cash either. So, you know, throughout this whole journey, it was mostly really making money, taking loans. I took a huge amount of debt in that business. I made the stupid mistake of
in the agency,
in the web design agency. I made a stupid mistake of running it as a sole trader, and that basically means that you have no protection. So when you rack up bills with HMRC, well, you're going bankrupt. Like you know, and it kind of got to almost that level. And so there was, you know, that kind of came to fruition probably about 7 or 8 years ago, where it just like all went down.
Wow.
And you know, all the companies that I'd had, the shares I had in those companies, all gone. Everything gone. You know, even like we had a caravan, and it was on finance, just to do some holidaying. That got taken. My car got taken. I had to buy some kind of £1,000 kind of crappy car because it was all kind of getting managed into a way that I could get out of the situation. So it hasn't been plain sailing, you know. But I don't think in running any business is. But you know, I think it's there's learnings in that. I think, you know, from the business that we're in now, you know, that was the second business after all that happened, and you know, I have a much greater understanding of the numbers and the finances and the debt and all that stuff now.
Did you, looking back, did you kind of push that, almost try to, I don't want to say ignore, but you were doing 4 or 5 different businesses involved with different things. This bit's exciting, this bit's exciting. Did you feel like you took your eye off that, and then that quickly spiraled into a big tax bill? That
it's that thing of, you know, you're always. I think the thing with agencies is you're playing a bit of a numbers game a lot of the time, because you know, you obviously start a project and you maybe get some money up front, but then you got to finish it to get the rest. And so you kind of end up in a position where you're playing with the figures a little, because you know, maybe the project's taking longer than you expected, maybe it's costing more than you expected. So there was lots of that stuff that was playing into just being. It's just for me, you know, and I have friends that run agencies, and you know, I just think I was glad when I got out of that kind of industry. It was something I knew a lot about, but you know, it's not a great business from a scalability perspective, and that's why I wanted to move away from that to product. But it was more that you just always expected it to get better. You know, like, as any business, you know, you're always. I think I'm a lot more pessimistic now than I used to be. You know, it's sort of it's probably damaged my ability to be really optimistic about stuff. Like now I'm like, you know, super pessimistic about everything. But
is it pessimism or more?
Oh, it's probably reality. Yeah, yeah, it's a fair point. I think at those points you were just like, well, you know, what's the problem with taking a 20 grand, you know, loan against the house? Literally, a 20 grand loan a secured loan against the house, because this business will go places. We'll pay that off. It's not a problem. You know, so and sometimes it doesn't work out. You know. But I was taking a lot of bets at that point, so there was no outside money. But I guess I was taking money from loans, credit cards, you know, HMRC, you know, like all that stuff happened. You know, you learn valuable lessons from that, I guess.
What was that the lowest part of that? Looking back, was that?
For sure, yeah. I can remember like when it all like, and I had, as I said, I had some other businesses going as well. I think that in itself was a problem, because you know, a lot of people tell you things like niche to win and focus and stuff, and you think, oh, you know, what a load of rubbish, because surely having more,
spread my bets.
Yeah, spread your bets. Surely one of them is going to be fine. Like, so you just don't really internalize. You just think it's always better to have more. Lesson learned. But yes, I just think you kind of you learn a lot going through those processes, and it was definitely, when it came to fruition, and in some ways it was great. You know, because I'd spent a lot of time up to that point, just, you know, every day I'd be driving home thinking, if I could just win 100 grand on the lottery. Like, that's literally every day. I was like, I don't need to do anything amazing. I just need, you know, 100 grand. That would solve the problems. Yeah, every single day, you're just always thinking, oh, you know, I hope this gets better. And if I just could do that, I could just do this. So in a weird way, going through that whole kind of process of, you know, the debt consolidation type thing, relieved a whole bunch of strain on me, because it was managed then. Like someone, like literally all the debt had gone, but I didn't need to win the lottery to do it. So it was damaging for me, just because I'm, you know, one of these people that like debt is a problem. Like I really internalize about it. I don't like it. And so, you know, it was disappointing to think about the fact that I couldn't pay any of that stuff off, but I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And I can remember telling other people that, because I obviously had to let down some of the other directors that I was in business with, and one guy was like, you're not fit to be a director of a company.
How old were you at this point?
Well, I'd probably be that's a good
Still
question.
young, mate.
20 something, 23, 4, 5, something like that.
Yeah.
So, like, you're like, yeah, he's probably right. Like, I've fucked up here and this is a problem and, blah, blah, blah. So, I think, I don't think, I don't think it was a good comment for him to make, but he made the comment and, so it was and it was just a lot of pain. There was a lot of pain, and there was that letdown of everything because it had been years of work across different businesses, but years of work and input, and then for it to just go to zero, it didn't feel good. And it was actually more than just going to zero because it was my wage every month. It was what paid the bills. My wife at that point, wasn't working because we had small kids, and so what was I going to do? So I fixed it, but but at the same time, it had to come to an end. Shame it went that way. But lesson learned of, don't take your eyes off the finances because it's at that point I was like, I had a bookkeeper and I just didn't need to do it. I didn't need to know what the bank balance was. I didn't need to know how much, we owed people or were owed. It just didn't really matter, and so, now I've always got an eye on where the numbers are going. It's something that, it takes a lot of my attention because I don't want to go back to those sort of days.
And I think for a lot of people, that would be it for them.
Yeah.
They would be at 24 to go through that much pain, to have kids, a wife to support. They'd go and get a job.
But I think I was unemployable. The reality is, I think like once you've been running your own business for a while, I think you become unemployable. Like, I think it would be difficult for someone else to, and I kind of ended up doing some contracting and stuff like that. So it was still running my own business, but was able to, there was so much I had to pay off about this kind of, this management thing. I had to pay a certain percentage off. So I basically was like consulting and building up cash to like alleviate myself from the whole situation and solve any other issues. And, but yeah, I don't think I knew how to do anything else. Like by that point, I didn't know how to be employed. Like it was a sort of, it's a strange thing, but I just don't think I could go back to that. And I knew that running a business is what I wanted to do. I enjoyed it. There was an aspect of just this is what I want to do. I want to kind of be a bit more in control of my own destiny to some degree. And so there was an element that I didn't want to lose that. But what do you do next? That was the kind of question that was the hardest to answer. Not so much. It wasn't a case of this is. At one point, to be fair, it was like I shouldn't do another business because look at the mess I've made. Right? It was that lasted for a while. But
how long?
It was probably weeks, really, like a few weeks or something. By that point, you're like, maybe it's like lesson learned. Like you got to. I think the path to success is fraught with failure. There's a lot of sayings like that. I kind of believe it in some sense. He's like, I think as kids we learn by kind of tripping up and and hitting our head off of things and stuff. You just stumble along the way until you learn how to walk properly and like I think there's a lot of that applies throughout the rest of your life. You just the easiest way to learn is probably to make the mistake. People can tell you to do it in a certain way. You're not going to listen most of the time. Sometimes you will, but most of the time you won't, and you'll make the mistake and you'll realize their advice was good, but you wouldn't have changed your approach to it anyway. So I think you learn by doing a lot of the time. I think that's how we're taught to learn, is by doing the things.
And was this, so it didn't take long, took a couple of weeks of thinking, do I get a job, do I start in the business? Quite quickly you're like, this is me, I want to start in the business.
Yeah.
Was this the inception of?
Well, it was the next business was a mobile app agency. So in a weird way, I'd kind of like pivoted a bit and said, well, we ain't building websites anymore. We've got to build mobile apps. And so we went into that. But because it was what I knew how to build an agency, and I had contact, I could like reuse some of the lessons, reuse some of the contacts. But it didn't take long before I was like, yeah, this is the same sort of thing. It's less scalable. I think I got that to 5 or 6 people, so it was better. But we were still getting into the same. We had no debt, but we were getting into the same types of problems where you're chasing money because that client didn't pay on time, and you expected this to come in, and it just ended up being another example of why I believe an agency is hard to scale. People do it, but it's just super difficult. And you need people in order to service the client, and you need clients in order to get the people. And it's a head game. You need more people, more time, more money, and doing that was too difficult for me.
Yeah.
So and actually, when I started Gecko, it wasn't called Gecko at that point. It was actually more of I wanted to build a product because I didn't know what a startup was, right? At that point, it was maybe 2011, 12, I didn't know what a startup was. Because I don't think it was a word I needed to understand. I was running a business, and the books I was reading was about business. I don't think I had any exposure at all into startups, not tech startups at least. But obviously, that I think that whole movement was kind of kicking off in a big way for everybody at that point. And so suddenly you're like, I'm using these products, and you pay monthly in Basecamp and all these types of products I'd been using in the agency setting. And so suddenly I was like, well, that sounds like a way better way of doing it. Like, we build software for people all the time, and we have to start from scratch every time, and then they walk away with the software. That's it. The deal's done. You don't get there's no residual income then. What if we built a piece of software, sold it to someone, but then kept selling it to them? Like, this is strange. Like, and it really was like a sort of like, sounds amazing. Like, imagine we build one product and then sell it over and over. Like, wow, like that's interesting. And so I'd kind of being programmer and whatever, I built the kind of first version of the product. And actually, the product had sort of already existed because I'd built this thing for the agency because what I was looking for was something that was between the complexity of a CRM, like Salesforce or something, with the simplicity of having a contact form on your website, right? That was the kind of position, was you wanted something more than a contact form because you needed to manage the data coming in. Like most contact forms then, probably now, they mostly just go to someone's inbox. The problem is if that person's on holiday or they don't pick it up or it goes to junk, there's so many reasons why you won't get that email. So I was like, well, I need a way of managing that better, because I would leave, people asking for a quote for, a mobile app, I'd leave it for a week or so, and by the time I phoned them, they'd already have a deal.
So you wanted to solve your own problem.
So solve my own problem, built this system which basically was a form building solution. There was loads of those around, but the difference with what I was trying to do was it also had the management of the data. It wasn't as complex as Salesforce, but it was enough to be able to say, I have dealt with this, someone else deal with it, label it, that kind of stuff, organize it. And so my idea was, well, we sell this for 20 quid a month, and we'll sell it. We just need 1 million businesses. We'll do 20 million a month. This will be amazing. Typical kind of base
back
camp.
of a
It's like the Basecamp style pricing of 30 quid a month's what people pay for software, and we only need thousands of customers in order to make it a viable business. Like, it's going to work. But the thing I didn't know much about was VC, angel investors. It just wasn't a world I was absolutely
investment world.
I had no experience of taking any outside money, investment, mentoring. I had no idea. I didn't have any mentors or any of that kind of stuff. I was just running a business, and I was just like focused on running the business. So it just didn't really occur to me there was a different way of doing it. And I had I pitched the product. Did I pitch it before? I can't remember, but one of the things I did was I was like, okay, I need this information, so I'm going to look at what to do about it. And then, I decided that an accelerator sounded like the right thing. Now, obviously, I think I stumbled across Y Combinator and was like, wow, that sounds great, but it's in San Francisco. That's not going to work. And so started looking for alternatives, and Ignite was the best alternative because it was in Newcastle, an hour away from where I live, really. And looked like a decent opportunity.
And fast forward a little bit. Since then, you have raised money.
Yeah,
you've raised quite a lot.
Well, so we raised 250 in 2015, and then 1 million this year. So,
and how's that
it's
changed things for you?
In some ways, it's obviously great to have a bank. But I think the thing that you learn, I think, when you start taking the investment is the ability to have a bank balance greater than your sales numbers can give you some brain space to be able to think about other things. So you're not worrying as much as if a deal doesn't close on time. But in some ways, that's a bad thing as well, because you get complacent, right? So you're maybe not pushing as hard as you should be because you got £1 million in the bank, right? You know, so it's a good and bad. I think I think it you know, we at that point, I think you get to a point where you just suddenly realize, like, we need the money. Like, we need to be able to stretch beyond what our current sales are giving us, and so therefore we have to take some extra money, and we have to burn a bit more money than we actually have available. And so it makes sense. Like, to me, that was the point at which I was like, okay, I understand why you should take money now, because we figured out how to sell, and we took, I think it was 250, from memory it was 250, and at that point we were doing like 250 ARR. So we took
250 grand in revenue.
250 grand in revenue,
yeah,
and then we took 250 grand of investment. So we'd got to a pretty, you know, good stage by that point, and we got a great valuation because of that. And then, you know, we raised again, you know, a different kind of setting, but it, you know, it's about that acceleration now, in a sense of, you know, we need to be able to hire people that we maybe wouldn't be able to do, or spend money on things that we might second guess if you didn't have the investment. So I think there's definitely a time at which it makes sense, but, you know, I think up front, I don't regret, one thing I'd say is I don't regret not taking the money. I think if I'd taken that upfront money, the business don't think we'd be where
you wouldn't
it
be
is.
here.
I don't think so. I think it would have failed because I would have had to force it. Like, I think there's, you know, I'm not exactly excited about the fact it's taken me 5 years to get to now, right? I feel like that's too long, right? A year, we didn't actually get our first client until 2013. We didn't get our second client until 2014. So, like, you know, it took us a long time to figure out what we were selling and who we were selling it to. And so, you know, really, if you just play it from 2014 to now, it feels okay. You know, it's not great, but it's okay. But, you know, from 2014 to 15, we'd had just this, you know, this great growth spurt, and suddenly then it made sense. You know, we'd got from like 10K or something to 250K in a year.
Wow.
So suddenly you're like, okay, now we know we've figured it out a bit. You know, so now it's fuel the fire a bit more. But yeah, I don't think taking the money early on would have been a good thing, and I think it would have caused us to push harder than the market allowed us to. Like, we had to figure things out. And I do think that sometimes time has a play in it all. You know, there's only so much acceleration you can do before you're kind of going faster than you're allowed to. It's almost like you can't kind of break that barrier a little bit. You know, I think in some cases there's some businesses that obviously need that and thrive off of it. But for us, I think time had a really big player there. We could have made lots of mistakes. We would have made lots of mistakes. We totally changed the pricing model. Like, we went from charging £20 a month to charging £8,000 or £9,000 a year upfront in advance, pay us that, and selling into a market that you know isn't sexy, higher education. So we went from this, you know, global SaaS credit card, £20 a month, you only need, you know, 10,000 customers to be a successful business, to, you know, enterprise selling to a big customer with thousands of employees, you know, and a harder sell, but it actually suited us in some ways. I think actually the agency days that was a similar kind of sales model when you think about it. It's like larger deals. We were doing bigger deals in the agency, so it almost suited it a little bit better.
I was just about to say, it sounds like a lot of the stuff you learned in those early days, you applied, even though you're in the tech, sexy, raising £1 million world, you still applied a lot of that learnings here.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, you're fully focused, and today you're fully focused
on education. I think that was the other thing. Like, during the Ignite process, loads of people, you know, you read these things or you see people saying like niche to win, and you're like, what a load of rubbish. What? Niche to win? But it's like smaller. Like, it's less people. Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's no logical sense to it. But when you play it out, suddenly you realize that the expertise you can bring when you focus on a single customer or a single type of customer, the job, you know, I know their job roles, I know how they perform their job, I know where they are, I know what conferences they go to, you know, I know everything I need to know about them in order to position the product and sales. I know their customers, I know what they look like, I know who they are. You know, you get into this kind of ability to see it so clearly that it's as though, you know, almost we're a university ourselves, and so we can talk to them in a way they understand, we can use the similar language, we can relate to them, and that actually, I think, is this niche to win part is, if you can nail that down, it's just so much easier to understand where to get the customers. Now, doesn't mean that you maybe have the scalability that you have elsewhere in the early days, because you've got to figure out who they are and how many of them there are. But I think it played out well for us, and I'm always tempted to deviate from it. You never lose that kind of, but what about everybody else? And it's still every day you're almost like, oh, but we could have been selling to hotels or just everybody. Like we could have been where would we be if we were doing that? And so it never leaves you, but you kind of realize that, but a few times I even dipped into it. I got to the stage where I was literally about to do it. I built a website, everything. And then, you get like a couple of people like actually contacting you. You're like, oh, I don't know anything about their business. Like, what was the challenge they're going to be facing? Suddenly you realize that there's a huge gap and you don't want to have to go and learn all this stuff again. And actually, so we've doubled down on education. And I think that's working for us. And
I suppose 2 questions to wrap up. Like, how big, where are you at now, and mainly how big is the company now, and like, what's next? Where's the company going? Where do you want it to go?
So, we're just shy of 20 people now, and just shy of $1 million in ARR. So, it's definitely a good stage now where we've got that kind of platform to get to the next level. For us, we now 40% of universities in the UK use our system. So which is a significant amount of market share. It's a small market, but still 40% is massive. So we want to grow that in the UK in terms of more, a bigger percentage. But actually where the big opportunity is in the US for us. We've been doing a lot of work in that in the last 12 months, just trying to figure things out. 162 universities in the UK, 5,000 in the States. It's
cool.
A bit different. So
exciting.
That's the kind of that's the forward plan is and it also, I think for me, I'm all about learning. Like the thing that I think actually when you think back, the things that drive me are the stuff that I don't know and want to figure out. So selling to the States is something that's been quite interesting to learn about.
You've never done before.
I think that's kind of an exciting next step, because hiring people, it gets boring. It's the same stuff.
And my last question to wrap up, talking about learning. What's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 15 years?
Don't start a startup. Just work for someone else. That's definitely one.
Is it that hard?
I think if you don't have a lot of resilience and patience, you got to be crazy to run a startup in some ways. I think I said I remember we were looking at raising money, and one of the people we were speaking to was talking about doing some psychometric testing, and I was like, Jesus, what happens if they find out I'm crazy? And someone was like, you probably, you will be crazy, because people who are crazy run startups. You don't get just normal Joes running a startup, because it's super difficult. But I think patience is probably the other thing. It always is. I think actually Dan, our mutual friend, kind of once said, the temptation to give up is always greatest before success, or something along those lines. And it was kind of interesting, because it was a point in the journey where I was like, oh, I think I'm done. And usually it's just that you just more time, patience, and don't do it.
Cheers, mate. Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks. Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Cool.